only an invitation. But when the initial connection was made with Patrick Gillingham in the various positions he held within correctional services, I only met him on a few diverse occasions. It was only at a later stage that I personally had dealings with Patrick Gillingham, and that I realized then the full extent of what had happened from day one. So it was a transition. So what actually happened was, when Danny Mansell left to go to the United States, I then was roped in and told, you have to now deal with Danny Mansell. I don't know if you recall with Patrick Gillingham, I don't know if you recall the video report, the video that you saw, where Gavin Watson says to Andries van Tonder, Brian Biebuck will now deal with Patrick Gillingham. I want you to drop off Patrick's money, but Brian Biebuck will now handle him. There's a handover between Brian and Patrick and Angela. So that's how, you know, you would work with somebody and then you'd be told, no, you don't work with them anymore, you work with somebody else now. So that's how it actually happened. And the full extent of the gratuities or corruption and laundering and that only really came to me when I read the full SIU report in 2009. So I knew there was things happening, I'm not denying that. But what I'm saying is that only the full extent of it came to me in 2009. And I confronted Gavin. We were actually, if I look back on it, I realized that they knew that the SIU report was coming out, and Gavin then insisted that we go on a holiday overseas. And it was while I was overseas that I heard that the report had come out, and I managed to get a copy of the report emailed to me at the hotel in Paris. We were in Paris. I was on my way, like I remember it vividly, I was actually on my way, I don't want to bore you with the detail, but I was on my way in a taxi with Gavin and with Andries to go and see the museum, the art museum. And I turned back and I said, forget it. You know, we had paid for everything, and I said, I want to see this report. And when we got the report, it was emailed to the hotel we were staying at. When I got the report, I had it printed out in the business center there, went upstairs and we started discussing, and I was shocked because there were things there that I never knew. But just to get back to the stories, after I'd started handling Gillingham directly, and after I'd started speaking to Mansell when he was decided to leave the country, that's when more stuff started coming out to me. And it was about in 2004, I know that they went on a holiday together, the two families, the Mansell family and the Gillingham family. Everybody, the kids, the spouses went on holiday. Gavin wanted them to go on a holiday with the game reserve to settle transactions and to make sure that Patrick was 100% on board. So it was at that, apparently at that game reserve holiday where Gillingham and Mansell agreed on what wouldn't be done and how it would be done. All right. So what then happened, and what I found out afterwards, was that Mansell used a company that he had called Grant 4 and another company called Alan J. Civils. Now, Alan J. Civils, I believe his son owned part of it as well. They used that to start making payments for the building of the properties that they were using and that Gillingham would be getting.
Just for the record, that's the letter L and J.
J. L and J, yeah.
Not Alan J.
No, not Alan J. Lima and Joseph. So then what happened was, when I was tasked by Gavin to start cleaning up all the invoices, he mentioned to me, you have to clean up Grant 4 and Alan J. Civils. So our task between Andries van Tonder and myself, and only the two of us were appointed to do it, was to go into the records, find every single invoice that referred to Alan J. and Grant 4. And those are the invoices we had to pull, change, and put back invoices in their place, which had some other description on it. You know, I asked the question, and it's vivid, the day I was called in to follow up the trail of Alan J. and Grant 4. I asked the question, Why did we have to do this? Why did we put ourselves in this position as a company? Why did we have to go through all this nonsense now? And the answer that was given to me was quite simple. He turned around and says, don't you worry about it. If we didn't do it, somebody else would have had to do it. Somebody else would have got the opportunity. And it was a concern to me at that stage already. But what was even more interesting, what unfolded, was whilst the houses were being built, one of the things that we picked up when we had to clean up was that Rian Hoeksma used an architect called, let me just check here. They used the architect called HMZ Architects. It was a lady by the name of Zitzman. They drew up the plans for Mti's house and drew up the plans for Gillingham's house. But Bosasa paid the invoice. So there was a slip up there, and that could never be cleaned up because it was on the system. So that had to stay. There was nothing we could do to clean it up, and I think Rian Hoeksma and Rikele came up with an excuse for it that they would then offer if they were questioned on it. But I was only actually instructed to deal with Gillingham when Mansell decided to pack up with his family, and Gavin agreed that he be sent to go and stay in the USA. And my involvement in that was to arrange the tickets for him, to pay for the tickets, and also to make sure that his furniture or whatever got transferred over. So at that stage, I was then called into an introductory meeting with Gavin Watson and Patrick Gillingham, and Patrick basically said, you know, he had a couple of requests. He had a couple of issues that he needed attending to. Gavin also told me at that stage to get the cash from him every month for Patrick Gillingham. And during that meeting, Patrick mentioned that his house, as I said, he had some issues. There was a waterproofing issue. There was a problem with the pool. There was a problem with, I think, some of the fittings in the house and that, and actually being very picky on it. I mean, you get a house for nothing. You don't complain about a pool that goes green too often and that type of thing. So anyway, my first job was I needed to sort it out immediately. I was told, you got to get it done now. So I then had to arrange to get a quote from Patrick. He would arrange the quotes, and I would get the information. And it was a quote to replace the pool with a jacuzzi and have a decking put around it. And I remember Patrick got me the quotes, and Gillingham sent them to me. And I think he chose a plastic or a wooden type decking, and that basically was it. But I just want to divert a little bit, because in my statement I see there's a paragraph there that refers to a meeting, a handover meeting between Brian Beebuck, myself and Gillingham. That did take place. Took place at a restaurant, come butchery, very similar type setup to the butcher shop, but in Midrand. There's an industrial butchery there. I can't recall the name. It's like a Siemens or something like that, where they've got a restaurant and a butchery. You shop and you choose your meat. And we had a meeting there with Brian Beebuck, the same meeting that was referred to in the video that should be taken. That meeting was held, and I was happy because I'd made it very clear I don't want to deal with the guys anymore. I'm not interested. So that meeting took place. Just to go back to the meeting with Gavin and Patrick where he mentioned the problems of the houses and that. I remember phoning Rikele Construction on my way out there and speaking to Rian Hoeksma and telling him what the problems were. I didn't have a good relationship with Rian Hoeksma at all because I'd always found fault with his building work at Bosasa, and I wasn't happy using subcontractors. So he went out, he sorted out the problem, and then a couple of weeks or days later, Patrick had given us the invoices for the pool repair to change it to a jacuzzi. It was about 100,000 Rand, and I then took the cash and gave that to Patrick Gillingham. All right. So I was also told exactly what the package of cash was. So in the meeting between myself, Gillingham, and Gavin, we were told, I was told, at least by them, that he was getting 47,500 Rand per month in cash. and that it had to get to him before the 25th of every month. So by the 25th of the month, he had to be paid. All right, so there was an instruction that I received. I was also informed that he's entitled to an international holiday once per annum. That was reiterated by Danny Mansell, that we would pay for his holiday as well. And if there was any needs that he required, any special requirements, I must assist by coming to Gavin with it. And I would have to motivate it to Gavin. You know, when Danny Mansell left for Texas in the US, basically I would get calls just out of the blue from Patrick. I tried to only meet once a month, and I think my credit card slips will show it, where I would have a once-a-month meeting with him. And normally the meetings would take place either at Midstream Estates, where he stayed. There was a coffee shop on the property there, or it would take place, he liked to go to the fishmonger at Centurion opposite Rhapsodies on John Forster Drive. So those were the meetings would take place. I would try and hurry them up and just get out of there. I wasn't 100% happy with sitting with them in those meetings. I had work to do. I was focused on working, and to take out 2-3 hours to go and entertain somebody is just, it's not my liking. So
what was the content of those meetings?
The content of those meetings was discussing operational issues that might have come up in correctional services, but not operational in the sense of how is Bosasa doing. The discussions would be, oh, you must be careful, there's a guy by the name of, I'm just using a name now, Mr. X, who's creating a problem. We need to deal with him, and how are we going to manipulate the situation to deal with him? There was one situation where he said, look, I want a private eye. There's a meeting that's being held in Drakensberg, and I want a private eye to see what's happening at that meeting. And I would then, where do I get a private eye? I would have to make phone calls and eventually find somebody and send them out there and do that. But those was the content of the meeting, was to basically solidify Bosasa's presence at correctional services.
Have you got any recollection of around about which year it was when there was this meeting of a handover to you of the responsibility to deal with Mr. Patrick Gillingham?
Sorry, Chair, I didn't hear the first part of your question.
Oh, do you have any recollection of when it was, around which year it was, when this handover meeting took place where you were going to start dealing with Mr. Gillingham?
It was 2008, 2009, I think. I can't remember exactly.
No, that's good enough. Around about those years.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly.
More or less. Yeah, okay.
Right. Let's just pause there a moment, if we may, because there may be some difficulty in following the timeline involved in the events to which you refer. You speak about the incident on the video that we played in Gavin Watson's vault, where a conversation took place as to how Patrick Gillingham's gratuity or money was to be dealt with.
Correct.
There, an amount of 110,000 rand was mentioned.
110.
Yes, 110,000 rand.
Correct.
And then later you've talked about an amount of 47,500 rand
Correct.
per month. Please put those in sequence and explain.
So I asked the question right in the beginning, how do we get to 47,500? And the answer was given to me that that is the same amount that he gets out on his salary slip. So I presume, I can't, well, let me not presume at all. So the 47,500 was calculated because he was earning 47,500 from the department, and then he would get 47,500 from Bosasa. What happened was when he was suspended and he eventually resigned, that was then doubled up because his earnings, the argument was, and this is from Gavin's side and Patrick's side, the argument was, well, his actual take-home was 47,500 times 2, which gives you what? 100,000 rand. Plus there was a 2,000 rand for cell phone.
95,000.
105.
95.
95.
47
sorry,
plus
medical
47.
aid. So there was also contributions of medical aid and that type of thing. So the amount was agreed on 110,000 rand. And that amount was like that for about 4 years.
All right. So the amount of 110,000 rand, although it's dealt with earlier in your affidavit, was the later amount paid.
Correct. After
The initial amount paid, which also involved you, was 47,500.
Correct.
Let me just ask too, you said in your evidence, and we've discussed this, that you only became, and you used the word fully aware,
Yes.
of the full extent of the wrongdoing in or around 2009.
Yes.
The extent of your knowledge before then must have been the drafting of specifications for correctional services
Correct.
contracts, even prior to the issue of the tender documents.
Correct.
So you must have known at that stage, to put it in a phrase, something was up.
Correct, I did.
You must also have known that cash was going out before 2009.
I knew there was cash going out.
What
Otherwise, why would they have done it?
I'm sorry?
Otherwise, why would they have done it?
Exactly. So I'm just querying the extent of your knowledge before 2009.
Okay, so let me put it in perspective. So normally people just get cash in the company. And I thought, well, I didn't know how much cash was going out, but I thought they were friends and they'd come a long way, and sometimes there was just a good relationship, but I knew that Gavin would have made sure that he entrapped both MT and Gillingham with cash. I knew that. It was going to happen.
Before 2009.
Yes, it's even 2008, around there, I knew that. Yes. The problem came in is when I found out about the houses. Because suddenly I realized that, and I carry on and I explain it in my affidavit in depth, that I was excluded from certain things, and I would query certain things. And I was told, don't you worry about it. Things like that. And we carry on in my affidavit, where I actually explain the fact that certain people at the office were involved in building houses. There was transactions that went through Mark Taverner and his family's business to buy furniture and that. That I didn't know about. That only came out later. And actually, the SIU report was very informative. I was actually shocked. I mean, I never knew about buying matric farewell dresses, or a holiday paid for, or a special kitchen bought. Those only came out afterwards.
Okay.
And that's when I started identifying that there's a major problem here.
So in short, even before 2008, 2009, you would have been aware of a degree of corruption?
Yes, I was. And I'd like to perhaps elaborate on that when we get to it.
All right. Let's then go to paragraph 19.12, but you have summarized at least 2 to 3 pages, in fact more, of your evidence up to paragraph 19.12. So if you want to have a look over those pages to see if there's anything you might have left out or wish to deal with more expressly, please don't let me rush you on to paragraph 19.12.
I think what is critical and what is very important here is the 2009 phone call that I got from Patrick Gillingham. So initially, Gavin
That's in paragraph 19.12.
Yes.
Yes.
I think that's critical because at that stage, I just started off and it was just the beginning of things. Danny Mansell was still there, by the way. And what actually happened was I got this call that the SIU had raided him. And more importantly, what he told me is that they had done such a good job of the raid, they found cash in the safe, they found his firearm, they took his firearm away, but they'd found a Concilium business card. And I was astounded because why on earth would there be a Concilium business card with his name on it? Didn't make sense to me. But nonetheless, I had to rush through to go and see Gillingham. And Gavin's first instruction to me was go and go through the house yourself and go make sure there's nothing else left. But what was interesting was that when they raided him, they didn't check the garage, and there were boxes, and I think they're still there today. Well, they won't be by close of business today, but there were boxes in the garage which had files and files of important stuff. So they raided everything, and then Gavin wanted me to go, but I didn't have the heart to go to a house and go through someone's house. It's just not how I was raised.
I mean, they raided, but didn't raid the garage.
No, they didn't raid the garage. No, the boxes were still there. But the interesting thing was on the Concilium business card, that told me something was much deeper and there was other issues as well, because he had, apparently when I confronted Dr. Smith, because he had printed the business card, Dr. Smith said to me that Gavin had told him that he had to get Patrick to accompany him to go and see a manufacturer or supplier of goods, and this supplier of goods, he wanted to make the guy realize that Patrick, in the position that he was as the CFO, also has an interest in this business. And the whole idea was to strong-arm the owner of the business to say, listen, we can give you business at correctional services, but you need to understand that we want 26% of your company. And exactly the same tactic was done to acquire the shares in Better Fence as well, to get the 26%. So let me just go back to that. I didn't want to go through his house, so I went down to a restaurant that was close by him at Midstream Estate, and he said he had been now suspended from his position by the then Commissioner of Correctional Services, Vernie Peterson. The following morning at about 6:30, Gavin Watson came to my office. I was always there, the first in and the last out, so I was there at about 5 o'clock. He arrived at 6:30, and he said to me, come, you've got to come with me now, we've got to go to Mti. So got in the car and we went off to go and see Mti at his house in Midstream Estates. And he then went, from there we had to go and see Patrick because he wanted to make sure everybody was calm and no mistakes were being made. So we then saw Patrick at the Protea Midrand, which is close to Midstream Estates and close to the place where Richmond Mti has his house. Slipped my mind now. But basically we chatted in the parking lot, and Gavin told Patrick not to be concerned. Patrick's biggest concern at that stage was his pension fund. He wasn't worried about losing his job because he knew he was getting 110,000 from Bosasa coming up. So he wasn't concerned about that. His biggest concern was the pension fund he had accumulated over the years. But Gavin said to Patrick, you don't need to worry, even if Bosasa has to stand in and cover the pension fund, we'll do it. As a matter of fact, in the car, on the way back, we had a discussion about it. And Gavin said, I must just find out how much it is, and we just need to make a contingency available for the pension fund. Gavin also said to Patrick not to worry, his legal fees were paid for by the company, and Gavin instructed me to then utilize an arm's length company that he had given us to attend to it.
It may seem very obvious, but for the record, why would Watson ask you to create an arm's length company to pay Gillingham's legal fees?
Gavin believed that if there was always an arm's length company, it wouldn't be traced back to him. So you'd rather have it at distance. And we've seen it in the revelations that there's always a Mioto, always a Syncoprop, always a Ariwise, or whatever company there is to be able to utilize it. And that's why it was done. So the carrot for Gavin was to use the arm's length company. It'll never come back to me because he doesn't have to sign anything off. Okay, so there was a conference on the go at the Protea Midrand. It gets often used by government departments, so we didn't even go in, and normally we'd go in and have a coffee or something to eat. That specific day we didn't. We sat in the car, and Patrick sat in the back of Gavin's car and spoke to him there. But then, yes, I mentioned to you when we were coming back, Gavin said to me, what kind of pension is it and how much is it? So I had to find out. and he said that we had to make a contingency for that. But he said, you know, they've been loyal to the group, and I think there must have been some agreement, and he wanted Patrick comfortable and T comfortable, that he said to them, look, we'll honor looking after you and that for the rest of your lives. Okay.
Did he mention in that conversation, that is Watson, how Gillingham and T had assisted Bosasa?
Yes. What he said was, he said all the tenders, I mean all the business at correctional services came through MT and Gillingham. And even though MT was the commissioner and he had no right to sign off a contract, Chair, in today's times, basically an instruction gets given and it happens. You know, people don't go against their bosses anymore. Jobs are too scarce. So MT just made sure he put the right people in place, signed off the applications, and that's how it happened.
Were arrangements then made to assist Gillingham in relation to his suspension and its outcome?
Yes. So what happened was, Chair, that about 2 days later, Gavin had been in consultation with Cecilia Siopela, and Cecilia then told me I must meet him at a firm. They were in, what's that street opposite the court in Johannesburg? There's a street there where Innes Chambers is, and all, one of those buildings. If I remember correctly, it was on top of a bank on the right-hand side. And I had to meet really a dingy officers, a company called, can I mention the name? I've got it in my statement.
Yes.
BDK Attorneys, all right? And I had to, and Cecilia was introducing me to a gentleman by the name of Ian Small-Smith. Now, before we went in to the meeting, I said, you know, I'm very concerned because this doesn't look like proper officers. You know, are these real attorneys? And Cecilia mentioned another gentleman in government that this guy had helped, and he was very successful. I don't want to mention the gentleman's name. He was very successful. They had made a mistake with a search warrant. They brought all the documents, and they still joked about it in the meeting, that they'd then taken the documents and burnt them before the Scorpions could get another search warrant or something like that. So this guy was highly rated. Big rugby fanatic, because we spoke about rugby, and there was rugby paraphernalia all over the place. So I then sat in the meeting, and he wanted to know what happened, and Patrick explained everything to him. He said, no, you'll handle it. And once more, he would then send his invoices through to either Andries van Tondo or myself, and we would arrange to pay it. And it was paid
Pause
through.
there, if you will. This particular attorney in this firm,
Yes.
were simply asked to assist Gillingham in a potential legal suit.
That's correct.
Yes, which lawyers normally do.
Yeah.
Nothing untoward about it.
No, not at all.
And what you have just told the chair about what you were told
Yes.
is entirely hearsay. You have no evidence to back that up, I presume.
In terms of the...
The Scorpions and the documents.
Oh, no, yeah, this was told to me. This was used to motivate to me why this was such a good attorney.
It
That's why.
just implicates certain people, and I'd
my
rather not do it
apologies.
on the basis of unsubstantiated
My
hearsay.
apologies.
Yes, go on, please.
Okay, so a company, an arm's length company was used, which was actually belonged to Mansell and Gillingham, Mansell and Watson before, called Synco Prop number 8. It sounded like a very nice thing that Gavin did for us. He gave us a company with a property at Ramsey Golf Club. So we thought this was, how nice of the man. Well, Chair, it's a hole in the ground. And it's really, I mean, it's a disaster. There's no value in it whatsoever. It cannot be
Let's
sold.
not digress at the moment
Okay.
to the hole in the ground.
Okay.
But Synco Prop was
Yes.
again an intermediary company
Yes.
to, what was the purpose here too of using an intermediary company to effect payments for the legal fees of Gillingham?
That's one of them, and there were other payments that had to go through it as well.
And is that the same arm's length company you referred to earlier?
Correct. The reason why I mentioned the property is purely because we thought it was a good, it was a nice gesture.
Okay. Just before you go on then, does that complete that section of your evidence?
Yes, it does.
You mentioned Concilium.
Yes,
Is that Concilium Business Consultants Pty Limited?
the same company, yes.
Was that the company that had formerly been owned by Dr. Jurgen Smith,
That's correct.
but transferred into the Bosasa stable at some stage?
No, it was never transferred into the Bosasa stable. Concilium was owned, and if I stand to correction, but was owned by Dr. Jurgen Smith and his one son, who owned, I think, 10% of that company. When Dr. Smith fell ill, about 3 months before he passed on, the company was transferred to Piet Venter's sister, called Mrs. Longsworth. That company was owned by Piet Venter, and only by Piet Venter. And the shareholders there was Boy and Qele. Those were the shareholders with Piet Venter to show BE.
Compliance.
Yes.
Yes. When I say transferred into the transferred into the Bosasa stable, perhaps I used the term too lightly. It was utilized by Bosasa in its business activities.
That was the only client it had.
Yes. Okay. Now, in that sense, we've heard evidence that payments were made by Concilium Business Consultants Pty Limited to members of the Watson family.
That's correct.
Mr. Venter told us this. Mr. Venter didn't say so with certainty, but said, I was told that for all the members of the Watson family who received money from Concilium,
Yes.
services were rendered and proper contracts of employment were in place. Do you have any comment on that?
That's not true.
What is the correct position as far as you're aware?
I can tell you exactly what Concilium was, because Dr. Smith used to bring me the invoice every month and the attached payroll to sign off. And I was sworn to secrecy. But, I mean, the fact is that there were kids paid on that payroll. There was family members, his wife, Lindy Goos was on that payroll. I was on that payroll. You see, the big thing about Concilium was it was developed to cover up what people were actually earning. Because the law had changed somewhat in that in your financial statements you have to reflect what people earn, what the highest earners are, and that type of thing. So government didn't want the black directors to know exactly what we were earning either. So that's why half our salaries were paid on Concilium and half was paid on Bosasa. But the family was on there. Cecilia Shapela was on there. There was various people. It's like a secret payroll. And if I recall correctly, there's Concilium 1 and Concilium 2. So as soon as Concilium reached the threshold, there was a second Concilium opened up on the payroll.
Were Concilium 1 and Concilium 2 separate legal entities?
Yes, apparently they were.
Yes, but the directorships and the shareholders
were the
same people?
Yeah.
Okay.
So are you able to say, in order to answer the narrow question, whether those persons who received monies purportedly for services rendered or as employees from Concilium actually did the work for Concilium?
Chair, there was no work done. Absolutely nothing.
Right. Mr. Venter also said that Concilium would raise 3 invoices for Bosasa operations, African Global Operations, Sondola, Bosasa Youth Development Centers on a monthly basis in order to recover the fees and salaries paid by Concilium. Do you know anything about that?
Dr. Smith we had to allocate charges to the various companies, and that was split up amongst the companies. So it wasn't all lumped into one company.
Can I just go back to there having been no work done by people who were paid by Concilium?
Yes.
Was that the position throughout the time that you were there and Concilium was there, or only from a certain time to a certain time, namely that people were being paid but were not doing any work for Concilium?
Chair, I'm talking about family members. Family members, friends,
yes.
Political alliances, that type of thing.
Yes.
Those people did not provide any services to Concilium whatsoever.
Family members.
Correct.
Yes, okay. But there were other people who were not family members, or were there other people who were not family members who were being paid but were doing some work for Concilium?
Chair, there were other people that were not family members that also didn't provide a service and got paid. Then there were people like myself. Andries van Tonder was one of them. There was Vince Caligaro, I think, was on Concilium. I think Kenja and Larkin was on Concilium. I can't remember all the names off the top of my head, but there were some people that did do some work for Concilium.
Yeah. Now, Mr. Fenter, I think it was, testified that Concilium was or is a labor broker, if I remember correctly. Is that correct?
No. It was never registered as a labor broker.
Yes, but did it perform
The intention was to, the intention of Concilium was to show that it's a separate company providing a service to BSASA.
Yes.
That's basically.
Now, a labor broker, as you would know, gets people who need work, who need to employment, and then provides those people to an employer who needs workers. And then for doing that, the labor broker will get some money. And so when the workers provided by the labor broker to an employer get paid, I said there's a certain amount that would have been, as I understand the position, used to pay the labor broker some commission or something. That's not what was happening with Concilium.
Concilium never made a profit.
Yes.
Not while Dr. Smith was, I don't know about Mr. Venter, but Concilium never made a profit. And my reason for my answer to you is that it was not a labor broker, was because it didn't comply with the certain regulations that are set out for labor brokers. And I think if the investigations team can look at it, they'll see there are regulations that govern labor broking companies.
Okay, thank you.
All Concilium was a desk and a computer. As a matter of fact, the lady running the wages, the salary department in BSASA spent 1 or 2 days a week working at the desk there and just printing out salary slips.
Yes, thank you.
You've dealt with some of the information contained in the following paragraph 20, in other words, payments made to Mr. Gillingham. You've spoken in paragraph 20.2 of the 47,500 Rand per month for the period during which Gillingham was employed by Correctional Services.
Correct.
And then you say in paragraph 20.3 that after Gillingham's suspension and ultimate resignation, he received 110,000 Rand per month.
That's correct.
And you've explained the makeup of that in paragraph 20.3.
Correct.
What happened in 2015?
In 2015, there were talks again about the SIU report and all that, and Gillingham actually was very annoyed, and he felt that he'd been shortchanged, and he felt that it wasn't fair, and that he also had to show some income coming in as if he had a job. And he was very annoyed about this whole process. So in 2015, I said, well, why don't we put him on Concilium? Because nobody looks at Concilium anyway, and then he can show employment and he gets UIF payments done and all that type of thing. So I said, well, if he's complaining, put him on Concilium. And the next morning, Gavin came to me and spoke to me, and he said to me that no, he had met with Dr. Smith, and they don't want to put him onto Concilium, but rather what I should do is rather use an arm's length, which is BE Foods. And because BE Foods was owned by his brother-in-law and his sister, Mark Tavener, that what should happen is he should be employed in BE Foods. Now, I then had to go and speak to Mark Tavener, which I did, and Gavin also spoke to Mark Tavener and said, listen, what we'll do, because what happened, Chair, if I can just, I need to explain this because it's difficult if I don't explain it. So you had BE Foods. BE Foods and other suppliers would supply Bosasa normally. But then we had Bosasa Supply Chain Management, which is the whole CARC tax thing afterwards. So what had to happen was that a certain premium of 25% had to be charged charged on top of the invoice price. And there's two reasons for it. The one reason was because it's easier to go for increases from the client. So you could show in 2014 that you were paying R13.50 for potatoes, and now because you added the 25% to the R13.50 or R14.50 as a rebate, the invoice price went up to R18. Now the difference between the R18 and the R14 would go to Bosasa Supply Chain Management. So with BE Foods, the same system was utilized. However, instead of them having to pay the 25% rebate to BCM, the 25% rebate would be reduced to say 20% to be able to cover the salary and the vehicle of Patrick Gillingham. So you wouldn't be able to pick it up if you didn't know where to look.
Was Mr. Gillingham actually employed by BEE Foods?
No, he
Did you work for BEE Foods?
No, he never worked for them. He just received the salary and a vehicle.
Yes. And the amount was recovered by this rebate structure?
Yeah, through the rebate structure. So if you go into the history of the rebate structures in all the companies, you'll pick up immediately, it sticks out like a sore thumb, that all the other companies are paying 20-25% and BE Food is paying much less.
Do you recall when the arrangement to pay Gillingham supposedly on an employment basis by BE Foods was made?
Dates and names are bad with me, but I think it was about 2015. But you'll be able to pick it up from the UIF payments.
Okay. Whilst we're on this topic, we heard evidence yesterday or the day before concerning CARC.
Yes.
And we heard how the arrangements involving CARC were developed and took place.
Yeah.
In other words, CARC was interposed as a supply chain management company.
That's correct.
To acquire goods for the Bosasa companies.
That's correct.
It made a markup and
yes.
It made a profit.
Well, because
and that profit was offset, said Mr. Venter, and you yourself said so in your earlier evidence, was offset against the assessed tax loss.
Correct.
Mr. Venter said, however, or certainly strongly suggested that this was an entirely legitimate arrangement that involved no prejudice to the South African Revenue Services. And he said that any falsification of invoices would have been picked up by the auditing firm with which he was involved.
Okay.
And therefore, for that reason, there was no defrauding of SARS. What would you say to that?
It's not correct. And I'll tell you why. Let me explain what actually happened. And I'm not an accountant, Chair, but I can give you an overview of what happened. And I don't even need to look at my notes. It's embedded in my mind. The fact of the matter is that CARC ran a loss of close to about 310 million rand. It was a stupid operation to start off with, okay? Then what happened was eventually myself and Andries van Tonder actually lied to Gavin, Watson. We said that because we were paying out to America, to some company in America that Gavin owned shares in. We were paying over R1 million a month. The company was going through a rough time. So what happened was we said to him, no, the Reserve Bank is closed. They won't allow us to transfer any more money because we were battling to pay salaries and wages. I had to bond up my house. Andres had to bond up his house to pay wages, but we were transferring R1 million a month overseas to America. So we lied there and we said it can't happen anymore. So that led to the closure of SEOC. Eventually, Gavin Watson saw the light. He realized this thing's not going to work. We're not going to get the money from the DBSA and the DTI, and he agreed to close it up. But the problem is we had bought a lot of equipment that was specially designed by a company called Shrimpco in the US and was imported and cost us in the region of about, I think, equivalent of nearly 20 million rand.
Won't you spell that name for the record, please?
Shrimpco, S-H-R-I-M-P-C-O. I need to check on that name because I remember there's a couple of names that, but this company supplied the equipment that specializes in deveining, weighing, and deheading and cleaning shrimp. And it's very simple equipment, but it's very important equipment if you're going full out with a shrimp manufacturing plant. But to give you an indication, the equipment is little trays like roller trays. I can show you photos of it eventually, I can bring them. And they've got scales and all little things and ice machines and that type of thing. So what happened was, Piet Venter was the one who suggested, no, but wait, if you change the name of the company and the focus of the guts of the company, and you say, no, but you're using their stuff, their equipment. And what happened was then, a series, this is when SEOC closed, a series of fictitious invoices were created. And these pieces of equipment were shipped out to all the catering operations under the guise that we are continuing with this business, but we are changing the very nature of the business. As I said, I'm not an auditor, so I can't give you the fact, I can't give you the guts of the SARS Act and all that.
Just pause for a moment.
Yes.
The leasing of the equipment
Yes.
to the various Bosasa
Correct.
operations. You've described this equipment as shrimp beheading,
Yes.
with
With trays and things like that.
and icing, specialist
Yes.
equipment to deal with little shrimps.
Blast freezing equipment.
Did that have any use in the prison catering departments?
Well, to give you an idea, that equipment was never ever used. That equipment stood in a shed in Port Elizabeth, and I had to truck it up. We used, Frans Vos will tell you exactly how we got it up, but we got it all back to a place called Leipitz Vlei, and I put it under, it was wrapped, it was still wrapped in its containers. I put it at Leipitz Vlei, and then what we did was, because SARS was doing an audit, we packed it all out and said to them, no, it's part of a meat processing plant.
So fundamentally, the continuation of the business as an equipment leasing company was a fraud.
No, it was a fraud.
And Mr. Venter knew that?
He knew it well because they drew up in one of the affidavits, we've got a piece of paper. Chair, I'm not joking, it must be the size of that behind you, which was drawn up by Philip, Piet Venter's associate, to show where we need to allocate the equipment and how much we have to charge for that equipment. So there was a big brown piece of paper. I've got a picture of it on my phone with names of the various units. Those units never received the goods. So then what happened was Frans Foster was tasked to write out delivery notes and invoices or delivery notes for each piece of equipment to each operation at correctional services. That equipment, then he had to give an affidavit, which he did, and interestingly enough, we used our own commissioner of oaths in the company to commission it, but that equipment never ever left Leipitz Vlei. That equipment was eventually sold for 3 million rand as scrap metal. The gentleman who sold it and handled the whole transaction was a guy that I put in charge. He was a family member that I employed called Peter Rieger. His two jobs was purchasing of equipment and disposal of non-utilized assets. So that all those assets were sold, everything, the blast chillers, everything was sold for 3 million rand. I think it might have been 2.8 million rand. And why I remember that is because I still fought with them because I wanted prepayment of the goods. There must be an advert somewhere for an auction as well, where we put it out on auction and nobody pitched up.
All right. Is there anything else about the operation of Sea Ark that you may be able to assist the chair with?
There is one anecdote with Sea Ark, with computers and that were buried at Sea Ark. I don't know if I should mention it.
I think you do mention that in your statement.
Oh, do I? No, that's
but you
fine.
may
We
as well
can deal
deal with it now.
Well, you know, we've tendered our assistance chair to assist, and one of the issues was the burying of Grant 4 computers and the burying of documentation. Now, there were two incidents. The one incident was at Leipertsvlei, which I was involved with. The other one was taking all the computers which contained the information and hard drives of Grant 4 and Alan J. Civils.
Just before you go on, just please remind the chair what documentation this was and why it was important to destroy it.
Okay, the Grant 4 documentation shows and reflects all the purchases for all the houses and the Form-T in Gillingham, and Alan J. Civils also reflects the same. So that had to be destroyed. And Gavin sent it all down to Port Elizabeth, and he said it must be buried at Sea Ark. So they buried it at Sea Ark.
Now, Sea Ark is...
It's on the coast.
It's a factory on the coast.
Correct.
On the beach.
Correct. And they buried it at Sea Ark. They put it in plastic bags and dug a big hole. I recall seeing where the hole was. I was told where the hole was, and when I flew in, I saw that, just dug up the hole, and they buried the computers there. But then subsequently, about 4 weeks ago, I get a call from the news reporter at in Port Elizabeth, asking me, do I know why they're digging up at Sea Ark? Apparently, somebody had gone there and started digging up, and they were digging holes, she said, where you could bury whales in. They were so big, but they hadn't found anything. But if somebody'd spoken to us, we would have told them. Those computers were picked up a long time ago. Gavin Watson insisted that they get picked up and that they get burnt. And they were never burnt. They were kept in the garage of Arthur Cotson's son-in-law, and they're probably still there till tonight, probably, or after they've seen this. But if somebody had just asked us, we could have helped and assisted in telling them exactly where they are. They wouldn't have had to dig up the whole coastline of Kucha.
Just to restore confidence in our law enforcement agencies, could you tell the chair who was doing the digging?
No, I will not. I will not. I'm already in trouble.
Okay.
They know where they
It
are.
was, I can say from our own knowledge in the legal team, it was an official excavation, Chair. From paragraph 20.6 onwards, you deal with more of the benefits received directly or indirectly by Patrick Gillingham, some of which you've already dealt with. Do you want to deal with those, please?
Well, there was one time there was a divorce on the table. I had to get involved. An attorney, a group of attorneys was used. The invoice was sent to ourselves to make payment for the divorce. But more importantly, a settlement had to be reached. Now, the one thing that Gavin said to me, he said, you know, the last thing, there's no greater wrath than a woman scorned. So make sure that the wife is taken care of. And the agreement was that there would be a 2.2 million rand settlement from money we kept in the trust account with the attorneys that would go to the wife. And that had to be arranged.
And who paid for that?
Bosasa.
There has been evidence about the vehicle purchased for Patrick Gillingham's
Yeah.
child. We have that evidence on record. Is there anything you wish to add to that?
I was just told to go with to make sure it gets done. Whenever, I must say, whenever Gavin had committed to do something for someone, he wanted it done immediately. So irrespective if you were on holiday, I think that one actually happened just before Christmas. It was like the 21st or the 22nd of the month. I had to leave everything. I had to meet up with Andries, make sure he goes to the Glen, make sure he orders the car, make sure everything's paid, make sure everything gets done properly, because he was an important client.
So, was he quite good in delivering? Was he quite good in delivering whenever he had
Gavin?
promised? Yes.
If you were doing something for him, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
If you were doing something for him, Chair, he would go out of, he'd make everything happen to get it to you.
Yeah.
And then you also refer in paragraph 20.9 and
Yeah.
20.10 of assistance given to Gillingham's son.
Yeah, I had to get a top labor lawyer. We have a common acquaintance with a gentleman. I don't want to really mention his name, but he had to interact and get involved with the whole issue. And there was a payment that had to be made of 700,000 rand, and that was made from the attorney's trust account.
And then finally, by way of summary, you say in paragraph 2011 who made decisions in relation to the assistance to Gillingham and MT. What was the position?
The company was owned and run by one person only, and he would make the ultimate decision. As much as people would like to think that I could make decisions were limited. And you could only make a decision if you had his backing and he agreed to it. Otherwise, you'd be in big trouble. I mean, he would turn around and say, I didn't know about it. And often he would do that. He said, no, I didn't know about it. And then you'd remind him and sketch the picture, and then he'd say, oh, yes, now I remember. But everything had to be approved by Gavin Watson.
Then, finally, you were asked, when last you gave evidence, to decode the list of payments recorded in your black books.
Yes.
And to give some clarity in that regard.
Okay.
We have annexure HH, which is at page 86 of your affidavit.
Yes.
Perhaps you should just take the chair through the information, which is important because it relates to contemporaneous notes that you made at the time.
Yes.
But it's your translation from code to names.
Very difficult.
So if we could start, please, at page 86 and just explain to the chair what you did to establish the spreadsheet and what the spreadsheet contains, both from your black book and what you have translated from your black book for the purposes of creating the spreadsheet, please.
So what I've relied upon here, Chair, is my memory, number one, and number two, the amounts that I know people were getting, and also the sequence in which I would write it, because these were standard type payments every month. So remember, the shorthand I used was off the top of my head. So if I had to give a package to Paul Pretorius, Advocate Paul Pretorius, it would be APP, because that's the first thing. But it could also change. It could be PAP, you know.
But basically, it was your own creation.
Correct, because
Yes, so
if it's your own creation, then nobody can
Yes.
fault you on it, you know.
Okay.
But if you use like Volkswagen as a word and then use those as the codes, as we did in the old days, then people can decipher it. So remember that I knew the amounts that were going out there, so I knew exactly what had to be paid out. JCB 1110 CAA means it's for Patrick Gillingham. It's, I would drop it off. CAA would mean that I'm taking the money because it mentioned AA, Angelo Grizzi. PLC would be Papa Leshabane. He would collect it. STL would be Sibian Lamini. All right, and then I knew it was for the Northwest because I put an N at the back of CC. If I look at JGV, would be Joe Gumedi, all right, and I knew that 30,000 rand was for a lady at ACS. Then I had, you see there I used the same codes because all 30,000, it was every month, 120,000, or sorry, 90,000 that went with Joe Gumedi to pay off people at AXA. So I kept them together. So I didn't differentiate on the baggage, on the bags either. But then, for instance, KLF was Kloof, all right, and Ishmael Tikani would come and fetch it from me. LIB was Lebanon's union. Ishmael would deal with it, he would fetch it. TTV 50 CCV, that was specifically Tandi Makoko, and that was for Limpopo, for the whatever MEC that she told me she was giving it to. If you look at TMK, was also Tandi Makoko, and that was YDL, was Youth Development Centers. NMR was Nombula Mokunyani, all right, and Gavin Watson would collect that. So KZN was Nele, and Ishmael Takani would collect that. So I would just make up these codes as I went along, but I knew exactly who it was, and I knew who picked it up. So ELF was Alfred Maikela, Ishmael Takani would pick his up. Then again, on the following one.
Sorry, before you go on over
Yes.
the page, the period of time reflected in these payments.
Yes.
Can you assist the chair in that regard?
Yeah, this would be in a month. No, not a full month. I mean, there were pages in the month, but I haven't got my black book here now. The actual list, the photostat
Yes.
copies to explain it, and I did this over a month ago.
At what time, during what years?
Oh,
Were these
I need to
payments
look at.
taking place?
We need to just look at the book, and because on the top there we've written the amounts.
Carry on, please.
Okay, if maybe one of the ladies can look at my old annexures.
Before you go to the next page, there is that TTV 50 CCV,
Yes.
and then in the middle the name is MECs.
Yeah.
Is that a particular MEC, or would it be
Chair.
certain MECs?
Yeah, the MEC's initials, I don't, or name, I don't know at least. Sorry.
Okay.
That Tani Makoko would have to testify to.
So, in respect of some of the money that you had to prepare,
Yes.
you would, in each case, you would know to whom you would give it in terms of the distribution person, as you indicate here. But in some cases, you would know the individual to whom it was going to be paid.
Correct.
But in other cases, you would know the individuals, but maybe you would simply know that they are associated with a certain entity or something, as you say here, Limpopo or youth centers and so on. Is that right?
Chair, the book was intended to help me check up on myself, and if Gavin asked me a question, within the next month. So
Yes,
within a month, if you asked me, if I looked at that a month
Yeah.
after I'd given it, I'd be able to say, yes, I was dealing with Tandi on that. She told me she was going to see the MEC, who is this person, and she needed to take money with her.
Oh, so even where you might have written here, Limpopo, you have a way of finding out who you were told the money would ultimately go to.
Correct. I would always have to ask that
Also,
question.
same principle would apply where I thought I saw youth center or something. Yeah, youth centers.
Yes.
You would have a way, if you got the documentation that you need, you would have a way of establishing who at the youth centers you had in mind when you were writing here, youth centers?
Chair, because it's so old.
Okay,
there's
not
no
now,
ways.
but then you would be able to.
Yes, no, I'd be able to
yes,
tell you
yes,
exactly.
Yes.
Because it was still fresh in my
With
memory.
all of these, at that time you would know how to establish the actual names of people, of recipients.
Correct.
You might not be able to do it now because
No.
of the time lapse.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, my earlier books, I used to actually write out the names.
Yes,
And then I was
yes.
told not to do that,
Yes.
to
Okay.
use codes. But my earlier books, which I think the one book we still saw on the video is still there.
Yes.
That book will probably have, because there were only 3 books or 4 books.
Yes.
But that book will probably have the full names.
Yes, and you say that book is still probably there.
Remember we saw it,
Yeah,
I think
yeah, we saw it on the video.
Advocate picked it up, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Page 87.
Well, 87, for instance, there, JCB was always Patrick's nickname that I would use as well. Then there's MMM, which is Molliton Gubo. 50 IMN, Ishmael Nwaba would take it through. Nwaba was his previous name, then he changed it to Tikani. MMB was Maria Mabena. MKB was Mkabela. SSS was Shishima Tabela. KLA was the Kloof Union. AMC was Amku's Union. KZN 20 RRD was Westville. And that would be taken by Rainer Rueda. That was for one of the project officers in Westville. GAC was AXA. MAC was Mohammed Bashir. BON was Bongi Mampungus at ACS. KZN was AXA KZN Airport. That as well, it would have been a once-off. I think you saw in the video where Joe says, look, I need 10,000 Rand to do this or this or this. That's those type of things. Then ORT 25 would be OR Tambo. There must have been a special reason why they wanted that. Then DVT was a chap by the name of Trevor, who was working for the MEC of the youth centers in the Western Cape, and that would have been taken by Donnie van Tonda. I remember we stopped that at one stage. Then TMT 50 was MAM, it would be Mums, Nyambusa from Justice for Trevor. ZMC was...
I'm sorry, did you say Justice?
Yes, Department of Justice.
Mums Nyambuse was from the Department of Justice?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so that would have been with a guarding contract, or even potentially with the security systems contract. I don't know the date on top.
Yes.
Then ZMC was Zach Modise, who was at that stage he was acting, so he wasn't the full commissioner yet. Then TRS was Transport 100. I don't know why there must have been a reason for that specific payment, because it was normally 300,000 Rand. Then SNK was Snake. SNL was Snail. RMT was Richmond MT. Sivian Lamini was 80. That was for Limpopo Youth Sentence. Then there was J20, that was for Limpinka. And then it was Civ, which is Sivian Lamini, and Tandi. So both of them would have requested the 20, and that's for youth centers. So you see, Chair, it was a kind of code that not even the Russians could decipher. But I could explain it. The only reason it was there was that I can explain it and correlate it for Gavin, because he was very stickly on checking that people don't steal his money.
Yes.
So I wanted to be able to show him that what you gave me to do, I've done, and there's the change.
Yes.
Yes. Just before you go on, SNK is the code for Jiba, as I understand it.
Snake, yeah.
And SNL, Snail, is the code for Mwebe. You've given that evidence.
That's right, yeah.
I just want to make sure JM15, 1/3 the way down from the top. Did you mention that?
Which one?
JM15. I missed it.
Yes,
So
JM15 in the first.
In the first column. Oh, that's
yes.
Josiah Marker, 15. For some other reason, I can't read the other things I wrote, or I didn't write the codes behind it, but that's Josiah Marker.
And the figures in the middle of the code denote, you say, amounts.
Yes.
Can we go to page 88 then, please?
correct.
Let's go through it.
Okay. You got JGM, which is Joe Gumedi, would collect it. And I said, sometimes I'll just use the same, I batch them all together. So I knew the airports company was batched together. So those are all ACA. So those was AXA. JGM 50.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Creasy. Actually, I wanted to ask you earlier on, in the codes, the last 2 or 3 letters of the code, by the way, in terms of what you told me last time, was there a principle you were following in deciding on the code or not really?
Not really, Chair.
Not really.
I would put, if it was difficult to remember, I would be more precise.
Yes.
But if I knew it was 30, it was 30, 30, 30 to go to AXA.
Yeah.
Joe Gumedi was collecting it, because what I would do is, after we'd packed it, I would put it in another bag in these China Mall. They used to buy them by the dozen for me, China Mall bags, and we'd pack it in there, and I would write on a note, this is Joe Gumedi, this is what you must take. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, but have you just said something about what ACA represented in those codes which bear that
So
name?
I would say AXA. But instead of writing AXA, I would just write
you just
ACA.
change it a bit, yeah. Okay, all right.
It's a weird shorthand, but it worked.
Yes,
Because even I, after a year, can't decipher some of it.
yes. You may proceed. You
Okay.
were reading
Sorry.
them? Yeah.
Okay, then you got JGM Joe Gumedi, 50 for Mums Nyabusa, JGM 25, Tau, and that was for Norman Tabani. And I remember that because I often, if I gave somebody a nickname, I would use their nickname as well. JGM 10 was KZN, that was AXA. PGC.
I'm sorry, I'm not
Yes.
sure whether you are still reading the codes as well. I thought earlier on with the other pages you were reading the codes plus the name and the distribution.
Oh,
list.
okay, all right, sorry.
I think it's better that you do it that way.
Okay, sorry, Chair.
Do the complete
Yeah,
document.
so that it's a
So
complete, yeah.
start again at the top. JGM was 30 ACA, that was for Jason Chabalala, and Joe Gumedi would collect that. JGM 30 ACA, that was for Bongi, not at AXA, that's incorrect. There was a company there called ACS that she worked for, that we did the screening for.
Okay, I'm sorry, what is not correct there?
The Bongi at
Mapumbose.
ACS. Yes, it should be at ACS, not AXA. If I can explain,
Okay,
ACS is a screening company that does work at AXA, and we had a
Yes.
contract with the screening company.
yes, but
That's the contact we had there.
but the code next to her name is correct?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, but just what you wrote after her name was not correct. It
Correct.
needed to be ACS, not AXA.
That's right.
Okay, but the AXA that is on the first two is fine.
Correct, yeah.
That's fine. Okay, all right.
Correct. The one is the head of security, the other one is the procurement officer.
Thank you. Proceed.
Okay. Then you got JGM 10 KZN. That would have been one of those weird requests again by Joe Gumedi. They would always make those type of requests because I don't know if the money actually went to the people, but it would always be 10,000 Rand, Chair. PGC, Patrick Gillingham, that was 110. RMT was 85. Then it was SST 100.
Sorry, you've left out a few. Let's
Sorry.
go back to JGM 50 MAM.
Okay, that was Mums Nyabusa for
And the next one?
JGM 50 MAM. Is Mums Nyabusa for Department of Justice and Constitutional Development. And JGM 25 was Tau, which was Norman Tabani. JGM 10 was KZN, that would have been AXA, would have been a special request from Joe Gumedi. PGC 110 CCV, that would be Patrick Gillingham, and I would have to take it to him. RMT 85 CCV was Richmond MT. And there was a reason why I put a Gritzi there, because I would always deliver with Gavin, or Gavin would do it, or I would have to just drop it off. And then you've got SST 100. That was for Gillingham. What actually happened there was we were given an extension to the catering contract, and that was the agreement that 100,000 Rand would go a month to the person.
Now, was that correctional services contract?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and Gillingham was one of the people.
Yes, one of the commissioners
at,
that was
correctional
involved
services.
with the extension.
Okay.
So what happened was, because those were Richmond Tees people, he would give them the money. We would give it to him, and he would give it to them. So, for instance, with there's another lady there, Grace Molotedi, when they had to motivate, and they motivated that they outsource Groenpunt prison and I can't remember the other name of the prison now. There were 2 prisons, so there were 50,000 Rand each. So she got 100,000 Rand a month. Okay. And then you've got the SST 100 CCV. All right. Now, that was Jolingana. SST 100 SNL, which is for a mistake on my side. It should have been SNK.
Is that an error?
It's an error.
So SNL should be...
Yeah, but it was an error in my book. I remember I transferred it like that. But I can tell you exactly that that was there, because that went to MT, and that was the reason for it. I wrote, my handwriting was so bad, because I use a fountain pen, so I must have smudged it. So that's why I read it.
So the error is in your book, not here?
Well, the error is my fault in the book.
Yes, okay.
Okay?
So I'm sorry, where you say there's an error, is it at SST 100 SNL?
Yeah, it should have been SNK.
SN?
K.
K at the end.
Yes.
Okay, okay.
So the problem is, Chair, I write in a fountain pen, and the books are very full. So I must have smudged it, and it looks like an L. So I didn't want to change what was in the book to what was here.
I'm
So
sorry,
this-
Mr. Akrisi. I'm sorry. I think the SNK should replace SST and not SNL.
No.
I initially thought the error was on SNL, but I'm looking at the previous page. It seems that SNK should be at the beginning of the code.
Well, I used to swap it around.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So just to get it right, in regard to the code at page 88,
Yes.
so is it the L of SN that is wrong?
Chair, it should have read SST 100 SNK.
Okay.
For
so
snake.
I understood it correctly earlier on. I just got confused.
No,
When
no,
I- okay,
I
no,
understand.
that's
It's,
fine. Okay.
I was confused as well, trying to
Yeah.
decipher it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, then we have SNK 20 SLE, which is also, it's because the book's smudged.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to disturb you again, Mr.
No problem.
Mr. Akrisi. I think part of what confused me was that I thought if I looked at the previous page, I would find the same code for the same person, but and I saw it ended with ACB for that person on the previous page, but here it's ending with different letters.
Chair, let me tell you why I did this, because if you remember correctly, the cash used to be packed by Jacques van Zyl according to a list I would give him, and I would give him always the same standard codes. And he started deciphering it. And Joe Gumedi and myself, Joe Gumedi actually reported to me that he's concerned because this guy's keeping all the notes. And that's why we changed the codes. So if you
Okay.
remember right in the beginning, that's how it
Okay.
worked.
So when one reads what you have here from page 80, is it 86? From 86 to 80A, or it goes on, and elsewhere, one should not, when one sees a particular code for a particular person, think that
No.
that's the code that will always appear next to that name.
No.
It's not necessarily going to
Never.
be like that.
It would never be the same. Sometimes I would, you make it up as you go along,
Yes.
but
yes,
sometimes I would make a mistake and I would
Yes.
use the same codes.
Yes.
But I tried always to vary it.
Yes.
Otherwise, it becomes a trail.
And basically, you would be the only person who would know this one, this code still belongs to that one, even though that other code also did belong to the same person some other time.
It sounds extremely suspicious, but
Yeah.
remember, I was the only one that had to decipher it, nobody else.
Yeah.
I needed to be able to open my book if I was asked a question by Gavin Watson,
Yes.
which happened maybe once every year,
Yes.
and be able to explain to him a reconciliation that was done.
Yes. And in your own mind, you would usually know why you are deciding on a particular code to be
Yes.
able to connect it with a particular person.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
So if I can give you an example, IMC would be Ishmael Nwaba. Now, I normally would put that at the end, but yeah, I've got MNG, which is Mollet and Google, MN,
Yes.
for Mollet and Google. So I would change it. 1 week it might be, or 1 month it might be MAM, or it might be MTM, meaning that, that's for, but I know the amounts and the names I can correlate with.
Okay, I interrupted you. You may proceed with finishing reading the
Okay.
list on page 88.
All right. So, sorry, we got to GMT, I think.
No, we went to
Sorry.
Jiba VMT, SST 100 SNL, and you explained why the code had changed. Well, the code didn't change, you just made
I think
an
it's
error.
smudged or something like that. I can't remember.
So
But I copied it
your
as I
black
saw
book
it.
looks like SNL, and this is an
This is
accurate
a reflection of the black book.
Yes.
Correct.
All right, then
Then-
go on then, please.
Then, for instance, J was for Mrebi. There I mixed up the two as well. It's always 20 for Lipinka and 10 for Mrebi. Then GMT 100 SLE, that was Grace Molitedi.
Sorry, just before you go on,
Yes.
the code for Mwebi had also changed.
Yeah, I made a mistake. I presume I made a mistake.
All right. Well, as it may implicate people, how did you make the mistake?
Well,
Is it still
I'd
your
need to-
evidence that Mwebi received an amount of 10,000 rand?
Yeah, maybe what I should have done is attach the actual papers here. And I need to get those papers, and for tomorrow morning, I can attach the originals and put them with these, and I'll see how I made the mistakes.
Right, okay. Then let's go on to GMT.
GMT was Grace Molitedi.
That's GMT 100.
That was for the two
SLE.
contracts. That was for the two contracts. And
Yeah.
I would have used SLE because it referred to Richmond T.
IMC 50 in
That was Joe Marco. I remember distinctly having to pack that. IMC 20 was Mkabela. IMC 50 was Tikaledi, and I know that because I pack it regularly. AMC 20 was the AMCU Union. NUM 100 was the NUM Union. SDL was Sivian Glamini, and that would have been the youth centers in the Northwest. ELF was 30, and that would have been Alfred at Kloof. 57,500, for some other reason I didn't write a code, was for Nele. And ASB 40 was for Andri Sibelele at Impowerdex, who I gave 40,000 rand to sort out the BE ratings.
I may not have been following, it's late in the day.
Yes.
But I think you left out one or two.
Okay.
But just for the record, on page 88, the recipient of the amounts reflected in code in the left-hand column are named in the middle column.
Yes,
The person who distributed
correct,
the money to that recipient is listed in the right-hand column.
correct.
Okay. Let's go then to page 89.
Before you do so, I think for the record, we must just indicate that some of the codes, the witness has called the whole code, but in others, he didn't call the whole code. The complete list is in Exhibit S9, starting from page 87, is that correct? 86.
86.
86 to, yes. Is it 291, Mr. Pretorius?
To page 91.
To 91. Just want to make sure when anybody reads the transcript later, they shouldn't think that that's a complete list when those last 2 or 3 letters haven't been stated.
Yes, so
Yeah.
again, I could be wrong, but for the sake of completeness and accuracy, can we read onto the record the names and codes and distribution person from Mollet and Gubo? Those after that. Even if it's a repetition, I think we left out
Yes,
some.
it's just important to get
No
everything
problem.
accurately.
No problem. I don't know why I actually wrote this differently. Might have been, I was doing this, as a matter of fact, when I was sitting during lunch times in the first session. Sorry, on which page are we now?
88.
88.
88. From Mollet and Gubo.
Yes, please.
All right. Mollet and Gubo. Then you've got IMC 50, SHI. That was for Shishi Matabela. That was a once-off arrangement, if I recall.
Why is there an amount in brackets? Which is the amount paid then?
50.
50, okay.
Yeah. The 50 is the amount paid. Why the amount is in brackets, I wrote something in my book, but I think there was an agreement that we get 100 in total, and it was 50 and 50 the following month. I can't tell
All right.
you. I don't know why 100's in brackets. All
Then
right.
IMC 30.
This is over a couple of years ago. So IMC 30 MAC, that was Joe Marco. IMC 20 MKC, that was Mkabela. So IMC 50 DDV, that was Dikeledi Chabalala. AMC 20, that was the AMCU Union. NUM 100, that was the union for NUM at Kloof. TMT 50 was the youth centers, Tani Makoko, and it was 50 for the youth centers in Gauteng. And SDL 50 was the Sivian Dlamini, and that was the youth centers in the northwest. ELF was for a gentleman called Alfred. He was the client at Kloof Mine, and there's, I haven't got the paper now, but there's 57,500, which was the standard amount for Mnele, and I recall that.
That's
And the last
Mngcele.
amount?
Sorry?
That's Mngcele at the,
Yes.
at the end.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know if that's the right spelling, but that's how I know it.
I think it is correct.
Okay.
And then do you have an amount ASB 40 BEE?
Sorry, just repeat it.
Page 88, the page we have,
Yes.
the last amount.
Yes, ASB. That is for a gentleman that did the Empowered X rating, and his agreement was he'd give us a preferential rating if he got 40,000 Rand per company.
So BSASA obtained a favorable BEE rating from the rating agency by way of bribe.
Correct.
Yes, again, it suggested to me that the figure that appears in the middle of the code, for example, 30, should be understood to represent 30,000.
In the middle, yes, normally.
They should be read in thousands.
Yes.
Thank you. Then page 89, if you go through them slowly, please.
PGC's Patrick Gillingham. I would distribute it.
Sorry, just to note here, we do have a date, March 2016 here.
That would have been on my piece of paper.
Yes. I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Go on, please.
Okay, PGC's 110, which is Patrick Gillingham. NWPC 700. So there would have been 2 payments, and this was probably the software payment to CD. Sivian Lamini handled that. I knew about it. I knew where the money was going. NWPC was 1.5 million. That would be also to CD. Sivian Lamini delivered that. KLF 100 CCY was Kloof Union, which is Ishmael Tikani.
So I'm sorry, Mr. Agrizi. So
Yes.
in relation to the code NWPC 1500 CCV, you are saying that that 1500, which might be thought to be 1,500, represents 1.5 million.
1.5 million and 700,000.
Or you say 700,000 because you know about it, but there is nothing here that in the code that tells you it's seven. It's
No,
one.
no. In NWPC Northwest, 700,000 rand.
Yes.
700 denotes 700,000 rand.
Yes.
So
Okay?
every figure is 1,000 times the figure.
Correct.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. NWPC, that's 1.5 million
Yes.
CCV. That
Yes.
was a bulk payment that went to that person.
Yes.
KLF is Kloof, 100. That would be for the union at Kloof. LIB was Lebanon, NUM Union. Ishmael Tikani would take that. KZN 57.5. DCB was Nele. And I knew, you see, so, Chair, if I can just add here, some numbers are always the same people collecting it, taking
Yes.
it to the people.
Yes.
So I always knew exactly
Yes.
how it was going, and there was similarities in every month.
Yes.
Sometimes there were deviations, but not that often.
Yes.
MMM was Moloton Gubo. MM was Maria Mabena. SMA was Shishi Matsibela. ISM was Joe Marco. AMC was AMCU Union. STL was Sibian Lamini. That was 80,000 rand for the Northwest. ACB 85 was Richmond MT. GML was there. I've got GML 100 CCB. I know it is for Gillingham, but then I've got a duplicate there, GML later on, but I'll get to that. Okay? So you got GML 100 CCB, that was for Gillingham. SNK, which is Snake 100, Jiba VMT. MID 50 was the nickname for Gillingham, was Middle Drift. GML was Grace
I'm
Muller.
sorry. This one says second Gillingham.
Yes. So there was two.
Oh,
That's
it
what
was
I'm
two
referring to.
Gillinghams.
So there was 100, and there was 100 in GML. All right, there's 100. Okay. And then there's a MID. So the first GML went to Gillingham.
Yes.
Okay? Then you've got SNK. Then you've got MID. Now, MID stood for Middle Drift, which was Gillingham's nickname
Okay.
that MT gave her. I didn't nickname anybody. All the nicknames came from the persons that I would work with.
The distribution people.
Yes, they would give me the nicknames as well.
Yeah. Okay.
So I just want to make it clear that nobody thinks I'm calling people snakes and
Yes.
pigs
Yes.
and things like
yes,
that.
Yes.
All right. So then you got GML, which is Grace Muller Teddy, which is 100. Then you got SNL, which is Snail, 10. J, Jackie Lepinka, which is 20. PLC is Transport, which is 300, which is picked up by Papa Le Shabane. That's why it's PL. And then PL, which is 50, was for a list of Lindela people. So you would have given me a list or shown me a list of people he wanted to take care of at Home Affairs or Lindela. Okay?
The list continues then on page 90
Correct.
of S9,
Okay.
and the month appears to be June.
It says note June, so I presume so.
Would you go through that list, please?
TRM would be transport, that was 300, and Papa Le Shabane would have collected it. TRM 45 plus 10, That was also Papala Shabani. He would sometimes come with a list and show me the list and say, these are the people. Then I would take that list, what was written on a post-it or a piece of paper, and I would go and discuss it with Gavin and say, he wants to pay this one, this one, this one, this one. That's where journalists and all that came into it. Okay. So PL 50 was AMCU, PL 30 was Kloof Mine, Alfred. And why I had it PL there was because that was Patrick Littler. And there was a takeover between Ishmael and Patrick Littler. They swapped roles. And then Patrick would have to take over these people. Then you've got IMC, which was the Driefontein Union, which was then run by Ishmael. I've got IMC 57.5. Now, the 57.5, everybody knew there was one person that got 57.5, and that was Mr. Nele. Ebnele. So I don't know why I put the Ishmael Nwaba, but I don't know why I used DR. I can't tell you. It seems like I got lazy and I started not writing the codes out properly. I probably did. MM was Maria Mabena, JM was Josiah Marco, Shishi, I just wrote Shish 50, Shishi Matabela. I think sometimes, Chair, you get tired of thinking of what code am I going to use now, you know? So I was fed up probably or late, and I just wrote anything down. DIN 10, I remember that was Deneo at Eastern Cape, St. Albans. Ngubo, I actually wrote his name there. Shishi, I wrote another 50 because Ishmael came back to me at that stage and said, we've got to give her another 50. AMCU was the union. So sometimes I just got tired of writing, and I just wrote names.
Before you go to the next page, the third name from the bottom of page 90, on the code you have got Ngubo, but in the name in the middle column you have got Ngibo. I assume that's supposed to be Ngubo as well.
That's my spelling error.
Yes. Okay.
Sorry, Chair. As I said, I did these while I was waiting during the lunch breaks, during the last section. Okay. Then there was January to February 2015. Most of these are employees. Alfred would be given to Patrick Littler. You see, sometimes I just wrote out the full names, unfortunately, and I don't know why I did it. I can't answer it, but that's what I did. Alfred is 40 Kloof. Carlos Bonifacio got 10. Andres Erasmus, I think it was Andres Erasmus, at 10,000. Then Reno would get 5,000. Dani Fantonda 5. Leon Fantonda 5. And Dr. Louis Scholz got 5.
Sorry, so here on page 91,
yes, Chair.
It looks like you departed from one of the principles you were following in terms of the code to say
correct.
You would not write the actual amount in the code. If it's 50, it meant 50,000 rand. If it was 100, it would be 100,000 rand. But here, you are writing the actual amounts.
Exactly. Why did it? I mean, that's 2015.
Yes.
So it might have been that in 2015 I didn't write the codes.
Yes.
I honestly,
you can't
I need to get all the books.
Yes.
You know, the book I got was the last book that I had, and a couple of pieces of paper.
Okay, no, that's fine.
So,
yes.
If I'm not mistaken, this was where I would issue, sorry, Chair, I think this is on one of the A4 papers. I think it was an A4 piece of paper. I'll have to look at the record. But there was Andres Erasmus, Reno Ruda, Dani Fantonda, Leon Fantonda, Dr. Louis Scholz, and I would give that to Jacques van Zyl. He would just distribute it. Then there was 50,000 rand for the Western Cape. I know that one of our ex-employees, Dave McNamara, there was payment for him, probably 20,000, because I know Trevor Fourie, who was the assistant to the MEC, would get 30,000.
I think you left out Tandi Makoko.
Sorry, Tandi Makoko, she wanted to use 75,000 for the youth centers. She didn't tell me exactly what it was. What could have actually happened here as well was that I might not have been present, and I just transcribed it from the notes that Jacques van Zyl kept. I might have been away or something, and I would have phoned him and said, listen, just sort this out for these people. So it could have changed. I can't explain why.
And we
Then
go
you've got
to-
the Western Cape, I've explained. Northwest MEC, 50, Sivian Lamini. Richmond was 65 then. Jiba was 100. Joningana was 100. Grace Molatelli was 100. Mrebi was 10. And Jackie was 10. The reason I notice here Richmond MT had dropped was because this was 2015. In 2016, he got more.
Yes. Jackie, at the bottom of that column, is 20,000.
Yes.
If you go back up, and I don't think we've missed anyone out, Carlos Bonifacio
Yes.
and some of the others,
Yes.
including Leon Fontonda, were employees of Bosasa. Why were they receiving monies?
You know, it
according
was
to
like
your black
everybody.
book or according to your A4 papers?
Yeah, it was like everybody, because if you receive cash, and who didn't accept it? I mean, if the boss comes to you and your boss gives you 10,000 rand, you know, it's your boss, he's giving you 10,000 rand.
So these are correct, quote, bonus payments, unquote.
Well, they're bonus payments, but they actually keep quiet payments, because as long as you keep quiet, you'll get your money. That's the truth of the fact.
Then you have some notes. Would you explain those, please?
Yeah. I don't know why I made notes. Well, I would have made notes, but I can't exactly understand this. But if I understand my wording of it, reconciliation, I transferred back to petty cash borrowed from Jacques van Zyl, 107,000. So in other words, they didn't have enough cash. So we would have had to borrow from petty cash, and the delivery, let's say, was R1 million. So 107,000 rand would have to go back to petty cash because the auditors checked that. So you had a cash loan for 107,000 rand you had to pay back. So to be taken off the order to be delivered. Explanation is there must have been an urgent need for 107, so it was borrowed from petty cash, Bosasa, and would be replaced with the following delivery. Okay, so that explained it. That if you borrowed from petty cash, when the delivery came in, you'd have to take out of that delivery and put it back into the petty cash box. On the 18th of the 2nd, 2016, this is just a reconciliation, received an amount of 3.2, then a further delivery of 2.8 on the 25th of the 2nd, 2016. The total amount...
3.2 million and 2.8 million.
Correct, yes.
Yeah.
The total amount being 6 million rand, less the 107,000 rand. So these were notes that I would have made so that if Mr. Watson wants to verify, you know, I mean, the money's, there's the money, there's the amounts. That's how it worked out. The amount less the packaging amounts would then be deposited, would amount to that which was deposited in the safe. That's basically what it means. Sorry, my handwriting is atrocious, and I battled to understand it myself.
Also, as part of HH, you have several emails on page 92
Yeah.
and following, but I understand those to relate to a different topic, which we'll come to.
Yes, there is one email, and I'll tell you which one it is, which relates to the same topic, okay, which is the codes. So sometimes I'd be away, and I wouldn't be able to do the codes myself. So, for instance, in 2012, that's when I would still give lists through to, and I didn't do the cash. The cash was handled by Jacques van Zyl. But people would still have to come to me and speak to me and motivate it so that we could get Gavin to approve it. So here's, for instance, an email from myself to Jacques van Zyl. I must have been busy. I called it codes biometrics.
Is that page 103, 104,
Sorry,
and 106?
95.
What page are we in now?
95,
95.
yes.
Okay.
The
Yes.
email from yourself to Jacques van Zyl of 9 May 2012 has a number of codes similar to the codes that you've been testifying about now to the
Correct.
Chair. The subject is codes biometrics. What does that mean?
Well, where I've been fortunate is I managed to get hold of somebody at the office, and they pulled my archive folder, as I mentioned earlier. So this is all new. I printed this out now in the last week. And these codes biometrics is just codes biometrics. What it refers to is that the reason why it's codes biometrics is because I was taught by Gavin that if the SIU come and they want to search, they're going to search for codes cache or things like that. So rather use biometrics, because biometrics talk about, we had a biometric system put in and that. So Jacques was in charge of doing the biometric system, and if anybody looked at the biometric codes, oh what? All right, these are codes I would have given to him to pack. I can't remember all the codes now, but ISM would be Patrick Gillingham, and I can't tell you what they were. They were done electronically, and he would have written them, and I would have known where they had to go. But you can see there, Chair, that this proves the point. On the 9th of May at 2:20, I sent them to him. I must have been very busy in prepping for a meeting, and I was on my way out. And what used to happen was I would have a string of people outside my office. There were people in my office all the time. So I would have typed this quick to him, sent it to him, say, pack it, and just get it ready, they'll come fetch it. Okay.
Then on page 98,
Yes.
there's a rather strange email from Donnie Ruitt to Joe Gumedi that talks about houses and furniture.
I can't remember exactly what this is about. It's part of the emails that I printed out. I've asked them to get me the inbox and not only the outbox.
Then on page 99, we talk about, or you in an email to Jacques Foncel talks about 550 loaves.
Yes. So the other thing was loaves of bread. So that was in
What was
2011.
What was loaves of bread?
Loaves of bread was money.
Oh.
So one
So
loaf is 100,000.
At some stage.
Sorry?
At some stage, you talked about chicken.
Chicken?
And other times you talked about loaves.
Yes.
For money.
Yes. So you changed it all the time, I was told. Remember, I was taught by probably the best scallum ever, so he taught me all these tricks. He told me what to write. So you would say loaves, and I would then get Jacques Foncel. I didn't get involved with the cash in terms of handling cash and that. I only did that, if you recall, in my testimony, when there was a problem that Jacques was recording people's names and that, and Joe Gumedi was very concerned. So I then wrote him, I think it was for Joe Gumedi or somebody, please start arranging the monthly book, at least 550 loaves for now. So that's 550,000.
I'm not sure many wise people would be fooled by that code.
Well, I progressed. I was taught. No, but at the end of the day, I will arrange for next week. Problem is there's no funds currently, and thus I cannot make a booking at the bakery. Also, who will collect as I will be in Cape Town. It's just a sample of how this has been inherent in the company for so many years.
Yes.
Then if you go to 101, if I could
before you go to 101, I don't know if Mr. Pretorius intended to deal with this. The email at the top of 99, page 99, is that a response to your loaves email? Or I say it talks about booking at the bakery and collection coming from Jacques Foncel.
Yes.
Was that a response, or was that separate?
No, that's a response from him to me, to say there's no money in the company, we can't book the money.
Well, there's an email right at the bottom of page 99 from Jacques Foncel to you, saying still no money from Westville or IDT yet. We did receive MIYC's money, 2.8 million rand, and Mavamve 750,000 plus AXA 2.5 million rand. Well, that it doesn't look like there's a code there. Is there a code there?
No, that's actual He's telling me he's got a problem with the debtors.
So this one doesn't refer to any bribery money.
No,
That's
that's
just,
actual debtors
yeah.
from Westville.
Yes.
So he's telling me they haven't received money yet, and I'm saying to him, well, you better get 550 loaves ready.
Okay.
Not knowing, I mean, I know that, Chair, if I can explain how I used to operate and how I worked, is I would be live time with everything that happened in the company all the time. I knew exactly what was happening. I needed to know what the debtors was, what the creditors was. I had all this information within me all the time and operating. And then I would get a request. So what probably would have happened there, I can tell you now, is that I responded to his mail at 8:37. All right? So I was probably in front of my computer in a meeting, probably with one of the directors, and they reminded me that they need 550 loaves. So I would have quickly, while the email was still open, said to him, listen, get me 550 loaves, somebody's waiting. That's how, there was no formality in how to do it.
But your email of 1 July 2011 at 4 minutes past 9, addressed to Jacques
Yes.
Van Zyl, is it a response to the email at the bottom?
No.
No, okay. And the one at the top on the same page from Jacques Van Zyl to you,
Yes.
is it a response to your one in the middle?
So sometimes it was easier, yes. It is a response, but he's also adding more information for me.
Yes.
He's saying the Sondolo creditors are starting to shout for their payments. So he's saying to me as well, listen, we need more money in. So one of the things I used to do was pick up the phone and start phoning people for money.
Am I right to think that your email in the middle of that page and Jacques Van Zyl's one at the top, those are talking about bribery money, because you talk about loaves, he talks about bakery, but the one at the bottom talks about money in the normal sense.
Correct.
So the top two
Yes.
talk about bribery money.
Correct.
Okay, all right.
So if you look at the date, Chair, if I may just mention to you, it's the 1st of July. It's the first day of the new month.
Of the new month,
And
yeah.
now it's pressure because we have to get money in
Yes,
and we have to get money out.
yes,
And
yes.
sometimes the money in and the money out were dependent on each other.
Yeah.
So if
okay.
you didn't have the bribe money,
Yes.
you couldn't keep people happy. If you couldn't keep people happy,
Yes.
they didn't pay their accounts.
Yes.
And that's why it's all interlinked.
Yes. Okay.
But it was pressurized time at that stage because at that stage the company was literally also going through a very bad patch financially.
Okay.
Then on page 101, if we can move there, there's talk of management fees,
Sorry, can I just, on page 100,
101.
yes, I just want to bring your attention to page 100. If you look, it's
Yes.
very small. I don't know, unfortunately my printer at home doesn't work that well. But it says on 100, Monday the 28th of February, please, Jacques sends me an email, but he only fills in the heading. He says, please let me know when you have chance or change to discuss the bread roll requirements.
That's something different from a loaf.
What's bread rolls? So it's
Small
money.
It's still money.
Still money.
Okay.
Okay, I just thought I'd bring that to your attention.
And who is writing now there? Is it Jacques Van Zyl to you?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's also at the 28th of February 2011. Because at the end of the month, what used to happen was the directors would hound me. And they would come to me and say, "Oh, Lambile, people are hungry. They want their money."
Page 101, you talk about Sondolo's management fee. Is that genuine? Is that code?
Correct. That is code as well. If I can explain to you there, this was the transaction done for the placing of access control CCTV systems in correctional centers, courts right around the country. So the agreement there was 2.5% of the total amount paid. So if the Department of Justice paid, say, an amount of 100 million rand, then immediately they would get reimbursed. The money would go to Siopela, who would get 2.5% of the 100 million as the bribe money in cash. And that would be delivered to him.
And is that the reference to a management fee?
Correct. So if you, yeah, so that's one of them.
Page 103, if we may go there,
This is the 27th.
contains more codes
Yes,
for biometric readers.
correct.
More codes on the following page, 104.
Correct. So this is when I wasn't doing it myself. This is when I had, Jacques van Zyl was doing it, and I would send him an email, and he would prep the code and prep the packets, and they would be delivered.
And on page 106, we
Yes.
have correspondence by email in March 2012, Friday the 23rd of March 2012, where requests are made for codes for AXA, and those requests are complied with.
So what would have happened there, Chair, is I might have been out of the office, and I would have got a request from Gumedi. I didn't want to phone. I might have been sitting in a meeting, and I would have sent a quick email to Jacques van Zyl to say, I spoke to Joe Gumedi, please use the following code, ACS, which was ACS, 15 JGS Joe Gumedi. So then Jacques van Zyl would respond to me and say to me that the code is ready for collection, and he has notified Joe as well. So Joe would come and collect the code.
Chair, it's just after 4.
I would like us, if at all possible, to go on for some time so that tomorrow maybe we are more confident that he will finish. I don't know what's your estimate of how
Well,
much
Chair,
time we will need tomorrow if we stop now.
Yes, it's difficult to predict, but I had thought that the evidence of Mr. Griti would take over 2 days. It looks like we're going at a rate that will take just under 2 days, although we are not yet halfway through.
Yes.
The problem, which makes it a little unpredictable, is that we've been dealing up to now with answers to questions.
Yes.
Very soon, in fact, after these emails have been dealt with, we're going to be dealing with new information. So that may take a little longer.
Well, from my point of view, if it's convenient to Mr. Agrizi and it's convenient to you, I'm quite happy to go on until at least 5.
5.
5, yeah.
Yes, Chair.
But I'm
If my
prepared to
feet
hear.
had a say, they would, but I'm happy to
What
continue.
is your situation? I would like us to try and use as much time as possible. I hope we don't go beyond tomorrow with him.
Yes,
My own estimate is that it ought to be possible to finish with him tomorrow, but of course we have to use the time we have optimally. So if it's fine with you as well, I'm happy to go up to 5. If you have challenges, maybe we could go up to 4:30 and maybe
Well,
tomorrow
can
start
we-
earlier.
Review the situation at 4:30.
Okay, all right, that's fine. Mr. Agrizi, you said you are fine either way.
Chair, I don't think you want to see me here again, so let's get it done.
Yeah, okay, no, that's fine.
All right. Let's go back to
Yes.
the emails at page 108. I don't know that I've left anything out. Here we talk about, or you talk about proof of payment for invoice naught. Is that a code or is that genuine?
No, this is genuine. These are one of the other favors that I've, please understand, Chair, that I haven't just put anything in here. I've tried to get the
Yes.
emails, and I've just been able to get access to some of the emails.
Yes, yes.
Now, this here was specifically a payment for a gentleman who worked at AXA called Ruben Pile. He was one of the security managers, and here you can see that there was a car service that needed to be done, and for some other reason it was called Big Boss Auto, and the amount paid by Bosasa for this was for an Audi S3, and the amount paid was 46,853 rand.
That's
And
on
this-
page 109. Is that on page 109?
109, correct.
Okay. Yes.
So this would have been authorized by Joe Gamedi.
Sorry,
because
what page are you on?
108 and 109.
108. The recipient is Big Boss Auto.
Correct. And the person who's copied into the email is a guy by the name of Ruben Pile, all right, who was at AXA at the time. And the amount was for a repair of his vehicle because his vehicle was constantly in for repairs. I remember it vividly. So if you go, so the trail I'm trying to show you, Chair, is that if they take these two invoices and they go and they have a look at the books of the payments of 2010,
Yes.
14th of December,
Yes.
they will pick up there was a payment made,
Yes.
and the payment was made in respect of Bosasa operations,
Yes.
and it was for 46,853 rand. They will
Yes.
then be able to see on the journal exactly the code which is used in the creditors file. So if you
Yes.
then go to the creditors file,
Yes.
after taking the reference from Great Plains, you'd be
Yes.
able to pick up the invoice, and you would have
Yes.
to look, you'd be able to see that the car, this is the car registration, this is the invoice, this is what was done.
Yeah.
And ultimately, who authorized it?
Who was the beneficiary of the payment?
Big Boss Auto.
Yes.
But the
on
beneficiary
whose
in
behalf was the payment made?
Ruben Pile from AXA.
And you mentioned Great Plains. That's
Great
a
Plains is the
software program.
computer software program.
Run by whom?
Well, it's run by Bosasa. It's a Microsoft product.
It's Bosasa's program.
Yes, this is a banking slip, which you all know. And then if you go, because the amount would correlate to, you can't just do a payment of Bosasa. There's got to be at least 4 or 5 signatures on an EFT transfer. So you would have to have a purchase order. You would have to have 2 signatures from the originator. Then you would have to have my signature or Andres Fantonda's signature or Carlos Bonifacio's signature. Then you would have to have a director's signature as well before the payment could be made.
On page 110, there's reference to a funeral in an email from Jacques van Zyl to yourself and Thandi Makoko.
So this is how things happened. You'd get a request, you would have to get 10,000 Rand ready. I would draft an email. It's for a director. It goes through, and it's just signed off. So I just wanted you to see how things normally would work.
Is that appears on page 111 at the top of the page,
Yes.
where you request Jacques van Zyl to draw 10,000 Rand to be forwarded to Thandi Makoko
Correct.
for the CSI at a funeral on the weekend. CSI being?
The CSI being corporate social investment.
Investment. Who was the beneficiary of this amount?
Thandi Makoko would have been the beneficiary. I don't know, who would be the ultimate person that was being buried.
On page 112 is an email from Jacques van Zyl to yourself,
Yes,
dated 13 February 2012.
correct.
Subject is request for donation. Could you explain what that is about?
So often, certain of the directors took chances, Chair, and they would go via somebody else to try. But it would all have to come to myself because I would have to phone Gavin, get approval in that. So I was probably sitting with Gavin at the stage, and I would have said yes or no. I don't have the response that I put in. I just have the actual email.
It appears here that Tandi Makoko requested BSASA to make a donation of 5,000 rand to a third party.
Correct, yeah.
Then on page 113,
Sorry, I just want to add something. If I'm not mistaken, no, it's not the same Zuki that introduced Jacob Zuma to Gavin Watson.
page 113,
Yes,
email from yourself to Jacques Vancel, Joe Gumedi, and Carlos Bonifacio.
correct.
Subject, Joe Gumedi. Text
Correct.
reads, Jacques, sorry, we have really bad signals. Is it possible to arrange 30 loaves for Joe if you can liaise with him, please?
Yes. So it
That-
just shows you who would collect the money, and that was bribe money.
Okay.
So you had to go and bribe somebody.
So you had to provide Joe Gumedi with 30 loaves or
Well,
30,000 rand.
If it was really bread, it would say white or brown.
Can we then please go back
Yes, sir.
to the heading Further Supplementary Information and Facts? Just to put this section in context, you have now dealt with the questions raised by the chair and others during your evidence on the previous occasion, and you're now going to raise new matters for the benefit of the Commission. Correct?
Correct.
All right.
Okay, you said we go to what page, Mr. Pretorius?
Page 26.
Okay.
You begin by clarifying the position or positions you held at BSASA.
And I think it's important, Chair, to clarify the position I held at BSASA. So the position I held at BSASA was of Chief Operations Officer. Sometimes it was called Group Chief Operations Officer, but whatever it was called, the name and the position of Gavin Watson was never ever mentioned in, for instance, the SIU report, nor did it mention that my influence is very limited. In actual fact, I was never ever registered as a director, even though I was theoretically an office bearer. But I was never registered as a director, nor was I at any stage a shareholder in the BSASA group of companies. Whereas in the SIU report, it actually alludes to me being the CEO and a shareholder as well. I just want to clarify that. But ultimately, I reported to a board of directors, and I reported to the chief executive officer, who was also the shareholder, Gavin Watson. That was the reporting line. There were very strict and stringent rules. My normal course of business and duties would include making operational decisions within constraints. I want to get away from this myth that I ran the company. I never ran the company. I had no aspirations, nor do I have any aspirations to run that kind of company. But I would still have to consult with each division. So my responsibility, even as a group chief operations officer, I would still have to consult with every single divisional director before I could take any decision whatsoever. I couldn't just make a decision on, for instance, who do we employ? That wasn't allowed. I would get backlash from human resources, especially from Papale Shabane. I was not allowed to argue, I could provide a CV and say, I feel this person would be of assistance, but I was never allowed to make the final decision on it. I didn't have access to any bank accounts in the company or the financial packages used. So if you talk about Great Plains, what I know about Great Plains is I would query invoices that would come to me, and the accountants would come with all the Great Plains documentation and show me what was happening so that I understood it better. But I had no access whatsoever to financial records, nor did I have any access. And in fact, the directors themselves don't have access to the financial records of the company. They've never had access to the bank accounts. So they don't know. The only person that had access to the bank accounts was the financial accountant who was put in that position. And in the case of the financials and the bank accounts, it was Andries van Tonder and Carlos Bonifacio and Tony Perry. So if I wanted to request information like profit and losses of the companies, I would have to get that directly from accounts. I would have to request it via Gavin Watson and say, look, I want to know what the profits are, what the costs are incurred, and this was the rule for everybody. No director was allowed to go and ask what the figures were in the company. It was just a no-no. The payment regimes and protocols required numerous signatures. So you would have at least 4 to 6 signatures on a document to be able to get a payment through and to get an order through. So it would require no less than 2 other signatures. So you would need the originator signatures, the person who's placing the order, plus it would read 2 other signatures, as one of which had to be the chief accountant and a director. So what I'm trying to explain, Chair, is that if we go into the records and we compare the records and what actually happened, except for the cash, everything else had to be controlled. So the payment regimes and the protocols required numerous signatures for sign-off, and requests forwarded by myself would require no less than 2 other signatories, as well as those of the chief accountant. Now, Chair, what is very important for me to note is that I was never allowed to attend a meeting with anybody, with the exception of Patrick Gillingham, Anil Riyad Krishna, and Gavin Watson, without having a director with me.
Was that the position throughout your time at Bosasa, or only from a certain time to a certain time?
No, it's been the position from day one at Bosasa, and I'll tell you why. Gavin Watson said, you have to be like disciples. Christ sent them out in 2s, so that if one falls, the other one picks them up. That I can show you documentation on their website, if it's still up, on that he always wanted 2 people to attend a meeting, except it was a sensitive meeting like with Patrick Gillingham, where one person would handle him. But in every single meeting, there had to be somebody with me. So there was no possibility I could bribe somebody, unless somebody can come to the commission and say, I was with Angelo when Angelo physically bribed somebody and convinced them to do untoward things. But the fact of the matter is, even with normal clients and negotiations, even just a simple negotiation, I would always have to take a director with me, or a director and other people with me as well. So I was never permitted to meet anybody alone. I was also only allowed to meet Patrick Gillingham alone because he was a sensitive case. And even with Richmond MT, I wasn't allowed to meet him alone unless Gavin Watson had said I may meet with him.
Just pause there, if you will,
Yes.
a moment. You've just said to the chair that there was no possibility that you could bribe
Yes.
anyone. I presume what you really mean is that you couldn't go off on a frolic of your own and yourself make a decision to bribe someone.
No.
That's something different from saying you participated knowingly and willingly
Correct.
in not one but many schemes of bribery within the framework which you've described to the chair.
Correct. And the reason I'm telling you this, Chair, is because, yes, I was involved with all of it. I've never disputed it. I don't discount it whatsoever. But what I'm trying to explain to you is that the mastermind is not myself behind it. There's other people behind it that need to be investigated. And I think that's what Advocate Pretorius is saying is 100% correct. For instance, if I had met with Patrick Gillingham, I would literally have to debrief. It would take me the whole trip from Pretoria or Midrand back to Krugersdorp to debrief Gavin Watson on exactly what had transpired in the meeting. So it was a very controlling type environment. And it was the same type of rule that everybody in the company had to apply. I was mandated by a resolution to sign auditor statements, checks, EFTs, and payment requests. That's in the company records. But I was not allowed to do this on my own. And it would require at least a second signature, which had to be a director or Gavin Watson himself. You must understand, Gavin Watson didn't sign anything. He's very clever there. He never signed a thing. At no stage did I have any permission to draw cash or make payments. These decisions had always been made by Gavin Watson or an appropriate director if it had been approved by Gavin. So even if a director came to me and said, you know, I need to book a vehicle for the weekend because Mr. Joe X is coming to visit and I want to entertain him. No, it still had to be approved. And every one of the directors will tell you that. It always had to be approved by Gavin Watson, who would always make the final decision. To the extent that I could make operational decisions, I wasn't allowed or permitted to hire staff, make commitments, or dismiss staff without directors' express permission and the approval of the Human Resources Department. Those rules were there. I had to stick by them.
Okay, before you go on,
Yes.
evidence was given by Mr. Fenter yesterday that Mr. Reichers was employed within Concilium, I think, and that he was related to you.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That is correct, Chair.
Who employed him?
Mr. Reicher was employed by Gavin Watson. Gavin Watson interviewed Mr. Reicher in my office. He wanted we had a major problem in one of the subsidiary companies where we had the young bulls fighting with each other. So he asked me to find somebody that had engineering background and would be able to attend to the staff and deal with them. But also, more importantly, we were concerned that we were losing money on procurement of technical equipment because we didn't have technical people doing the technical procurement. So Gavin Watson, Doc Smith actually, and myself, I just brought Peter Riga to the table. He's about 82 years old. At the time he was about 75, and I felt that he could add value because he had worked for ABI and he had worked for Husky Refrigeration, and I felt he could add value. The reason he was retired, he didn't need to work. He was actually doing me a favor. So the reason I brought him on board was because of that. I suggested that Doc Smith look at his CV, which he did. Doc Smith and Gavin Watson actually employed Peter Riga. There were, I'll tell you now exactly who were family members of mine. There was a Charles Macbeth. Charles Macbeth was in charge of security. Gavin Watson interviewed him. He was placed on Concilium's payroll by Doc Smith, and he ran the security operations for AXA. He was also employed because of his knowledge in property, and he was utilized to manage and oversee the regional offices in the various areas. Okay? There was, there was a youngster that was employed by the name of Shane Peterson, who was somehow related to me. I don't even know how. But Shane Peterson was employed. I asked him to resign. I suggested he resign in 2016. He was responsible for putting business intelligence into the company in terms of software solutions that he developed for me to be able to give me one entry point on an iPad where I could see the performance of the company. Shane Peterson then left. He got a job where he now heads up one of the major companies, FMCG companies in South Africa. At any one time, I could not employ anybody, and I would make sure that they didn't report directly to myself. Whoever had been employed, for instance, Peter Riga would report to Trevor Matenjwa, who was one of the directors, not directly to me. Charles Macbeth reported directly to Joe Gumedi, and so I don't see the issue there. As a matter of fact, Gavin advocated employing family members. We must be 30 family and wife husband-wife family teams of people working at the company. So I don't know what the issue would have been there.
Thank you. 23.9, you make mention of further limitations on your powers.
I couldn't appoint suppliers or change suppliers on my own. That was a no-no. Because Chair, if I'm working with Trevor Matenjwa and Fez Mzazi, they're running Sondolo IT. So I can only offer advice. I'm a support structure to them. Yes, I do manage them in terms of budgets and in terms of bottom line profits. That was my function. I had to make sure that they delivered, and operationally they made a success out of it, and they made profits. So I can't dictate to them who they should employ. So any or which suppliers they should use. So if they, for instance, said to me they want to use Daewoo, or they would like to use Bosch, or they would like to use Samsung, if they put a business case for that, I can't just go in and change it. It's a proper business case for that. And there was no ways I could walk in and say, oh, well, we're changing the bread supplier today. The bread supplier, we don't like Albany anymore. We prefer using Tiger, or I mustn't use brand names, but
All right.
some other company. I couldn't make that decision because it would impact on operational. You were dealing with people. If you made one change in correctional centers, you could cause a riot. If you changed the supplier of Millimill, if you didn't supply Mr. Ace Millimill, you had a problem. So you couldn't make those decisions without having consulted with the actual individual director concerned. So those were the limitations that I had, and I had to work within them.
Legal matters?
Legal matters, there was a legal preference, let's put it that way. I tried to utilize 2 or 3 different attorney firms, but ultimately Gavin would make the decision, and it was based on who had been loyal to the family for long enough. So, for instance, in Port Elizabeth, sometimes he'd use, I don't want to mention names, I don't think I should, Advocate Pretorius, Mayor.
Yes.
Must I mention names?
It's not my decision.
Sorry, they're not.
If it's necessary,
Okay, but for instance, there were certain attorneys that were loyal to the Watson family, so they would use them. And that's how it worked. I couldn't decide, well, I'd like to use Sonnenberg because their coffee's really great and they've got the best pens that you can take with you when you finish with them. No, not at all. That would be, I would be told, you will use this attorney and this is what they're good at.
yes, you've mentioned attorneys' names
Sorry.
in relation to particular incidents. So
Did I?
it's
Sorry.
not necessary to repeat them again, but if you want to, I'm not going to stop you.
No, my understanding is that he was just mentioning a name.
Well, they do make
not
the best
because
coffee.
there was a particular incident.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Well, your evidence is, and has been throughout, that certain firms of attorneys were used.
Yes.
They're already on record, so there's no problem in mentioning
Well,
them
it was Brian Bebuck was used. He was a personal friend, and I mean, he was involved with the Watsons for many, many years. Graham Richards was another one that Gavin used in Port Elizabeth. There's one attorney I brought to the table, but he got used once or twice. And then he was hijacked, and Gavin Watson wanted his son to get involved with him. So, you know, it was very regimental. You had parameters in which you could work, and you couldn't make decisions out of those parameters.
Right, and then 2311.
2311 is very clear, Chair, is that every single dealing in that company in terms of corrupt activities, including payment for tenders, gratuities, absolutely everything was done verbally, and you were just told to get on and do it, and it was approved by Gavin. He wouldn't write anything down. He never had a secretary, didn't have, he always went around jokingly saying, I don't have a secretary, I don't have a email. We did have an email, and that was it. I mean, so you had to do all the work and sign everything and walk away scot-free.
Do I understand you correctly? The point you're making there is not that others weren't involved in corrupt activities
No.
in one form or another, but that there's no basis for saying that everything happened without Gavin Watson's involvement. There's
Chair.
no basis for saying that.
Chair, there's no basis for saying that. Gavin Watson knew about absolutely everything.
And then 23.12?
Well, that is, I was instructed I had to provide a support service to the directors who would come to me with requests that were to be made. I would then approach Gavin. I was the intermediary at times, where if Ishmael needed a new set of tires on his car, he would come to me, speak to me about the tires, and I would have to go and negotiate with Gavin on Ishmael's behalf. 9 out of 10 times, myself and Gavin had a discussion over the phone, and he said, "No, I'm peed off with Ishmael this month, let him wait another month for his tires." But if Ishmael wanted a bribe for a certain individual that was critical, then Ishmael would go to Gavin or to myself, and he would start debating it, and then I would be pulled into the conversation. Sometimes I was never pulled into the conversation, and these things just happened on their own.
Then in paragraph 24, you wish to deal with a topic that we've already dealt with. I
Yes.
don't know if it's necessary to go there again, but if you wish to, you may.
I think it's important because, for the record, I just want to place it on 24. And once more, I'm not trying to absolve myself of any guilt. I think the chair knows me from the first day I arrived here. I was very open about it. And during the time I was employed, I knew that there were political connections with Gavin Watson and the directors, and that they were being awarded tenders. I knew something was happening. The detail maybe I didn't know, but I was aware that there were gratifications that were being given to relevant people.
Gratifications being bribes.
Bribes. It's gratification. You give me this, I'll give you that. It's a bribe. So I knew that this was happening. But until, Chair, I became personally involved, all right, when these cash payments were made and handed over, as well as other gratifications like the cars, the flights, the hotel stays, the holidays, the precise detail of the other payments, I did not know the exact amounts. And that's why one was in a position where you couldn't really go and sniff too much, because then you really get involved and then you're in trouble. And there's many a times people were dismissed just because they asked the wrong question. My role, right in the beginning, I'm talking the period 2002, 2003, 2004, was limited to drafting the specifications for correctional services. I ever became aware of the corrective activities when the matters started to come out in the press and they were ventilated in the press. And then more so, the shock came in 2009 when I actually got a report of the SIU. And when we started cleaning up, I picked up more stuff that the SIU hadn't picked up on yet, or hadn't been found out yet. And it just started getting worse and worse and worse.
Yeah. But you've already conceded, I think, fairly that even before 2006, you were aware generally of corrupt activities.
I knew there was corrupt activities, but the detail I didn't know. I'll never forget, Chair, I was on my way on holiday with my family at Owatambo. It was 7:30 in the morning. I was catching a flight out, and I was in the international section. And I was lying on one of these waterbeds getting a beautiful massage with these machines that close up on you. And I was in there, and I was really relaxed. And I got a phone call from Cape Town to say, "Have you seen the newspaper?" And I said, "No, I haven't seen the newspaper." And if you refer to Annexure JJ, that was the very first report that Adrian Basson and Corinne Duplessis, I think, yeah, Corinne Duplessis was involved.
At page 115.
Correct. I just want to get to it here, sorry.
Where the headline reads, Linda T. und Ken Belangenbotsing by Contra.
When that contract came out, and I was shocked because I didn't know about Leonora Investments.
This was published on 31 March 2006.
That's right.
In De Berger.
That's right.
Okay.
And then there was
So you say this was the first newspaper article that you are aware of that came up with some of the things about Busasa?
This opened up the Sundolo link with Leonora Investments.
Yes.
And it was we didn't even know about Leonora. I didn't know about Leonora. So what I'm trying to say, Chair, is I knew there was things going on. This article opened my eyes to there's something funny. But then when we started questioning it, I said, no, there's nothing, don't worry, you know. So that was the eye-opener.
Yes, but notwithstanding your eyes being opened, they already had been opened to a degree, but not to detail. You continued with your activities after 2006.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. 25 you've dealt with already. Perhaps you should deal with I presume you regard them as important allegations, and they do appear to be important, from paragraph 26 onwards.
Yeah. From 25, well, you know, and I've asked the investigators to call in certain people that were there when they did the agreements and all that type of thing, because I wasn't there and I don't know what agreements were made. But I've given them the detail, Chair. At that stage, I'd like to add as well that I've done my utmost to assist the Commission and possible the Hawks. And I'm not looking for any clemency or anything like that. This has not only included the confirmation of an additional facts relating to the SIU report of the Department of Correctional Services. So the SIU report is good in one sense, but it doesn't cover everything. What I'm trying to explain is that we've tried everything possible to bring to fruition, to state capture, a classic example of what state capture has become and what state capture is and how it's destroyed the fabric of our morality and that. But I'm also in a constant battle to persuade further whistleblowers within the group. And I'm sure, Chair, you've seen the articles of people being frog-marched out of the office building with high, heavy handguns, that type of thing. So it's a constant battle. But I think that we've seen results, we've seen people come forward.
Well, perhaps if you're going to raise that incident, you should deal with it in a little more detail and not just in passing. It relates to...
Whistleblowers.
It relates to, well, they're not necessarily whistleblowers, but the frog marching out of the premises. I don't want you to reveal names or capacities.
Yes, I have no recollection of seeing any article about frog marching, but maybe one of the witnesses may have mentioned
Chair,
frog marching. Yeah.
in order for me to unpack this whole process, what was necessary for me was to be able to get information that substantiated the claim.
Yes.
So the only way I could get information was if I had people within the group that would filter me information out that are required.
Yes.
Sounds bad. It sounds like espionage, and it's been termed as extortion and everything. But in actual fact, it was because I'm fed up of the level of corruption. The fact is I would utilize certain, not utilize people, but people would offer information to me. I never ever threatened anybody for information, but people would come voluntary. There was an incident that occurred, just to give you a sample of what happened at this very same company. There was an incident that occurred where they tried to liquidate the company quickly. And obviously if you liquidate a company, you cover up all your tracks. So immediately they realized that I was starting to unpack this from the last state capture, and they posted for liquidation, voluntary liquidation. Is that what you want me to go into and explain?
Well, there will be further investigations. It's just that it may be that the chair is interested in your comment about people being frog-marched from the company premises.
Well, anybody, in short, in summary, anybody thought to be giving any information out to myself have been accosted by and removed from the company and just suspended by having, I mean, that have old, these are old, not old ladies, but they are ladies and some young men. They would have armed guards with R1 rifles arrive there, 2 or 3 of them, and then take the person and make it visible so that everybody in the office park sees this happen in full view, embarrass them. Why? To prevent anybody else from whistleblowing. That's what was done. There was an article in one of the, I think it's News 24, where it actually has pictures of this happening as well. And that is the perpetual fight that we have, trying to get people to help whistleblow on this type of corruption.
So I assume that you have shared either with the investigators or the legal team such information relating to such persons as you know.
Correct.
The matters are being dealt with, Chair.
Okay.
There are also allegations which at the moment, as far as the investigators and the legal team are concerned, are allegations, but allegations of some concern that at the time of the liquidation, and particularly when documents were returned from the liquidators to Bosasa offices, documents were destroyed. Do you know anything about that?
Yes, I do. It was reported to me. I reported it to the liquidators as well, and I think there's a process which the investigators are busy with, investigating that documents, especially relating to Bosasa supply chain management, have been removed and destroyed, and various other documents being destroyed as well and hidden at specific places. But I've given all that data to the investigators. So the problem we have, Chair, is that we want to get this thing sorted out.
Yes.
And we want to clean up, and we need to open it up. As our president said, we have to, it's going to be hurtful, but it's going to hurt, it's going to taste bad, but we better take the medicine so that we can get the country back to where it should be.
Thank you. I'm sure I will at some stage get progress as to what's happening about those.
I'm sorry,
matters.
I didn't hear that, Chair.
I'm saying I'm sure I'm going to get progress reports at some stage about the matters that are being investigated in due course.
Yes, you will,
Yeah,
Chair.
yeah, thank you. I've always thought that my voice is very audible, but today maybe I'm speaking quite softly. I think it's second time that you don't hear. Maybe I'm speaking too softly today.
Chair, sometimes I
Yeah.
don't, but sometimes, especially when one moves away from the
Yes,
microphone,
yes, yes.
the voice drops. There's an ideal space
Yeah.
between
No,
mouth
that's
and mic.
fine.
Let's then move on. Perhaps if I can persuade the Chair to the last topic for today.
Well, I realize that you didn't want to review the time at 4:30, but I allowed you
Well,
because
I thought my bargaining position would be stronger if I raised the issue at 4:45, Chair.
No, I'm happy that we stop now. If you would prefer that, I have in the meantime I remembered that you have been standing there the whole day.
Yes.
Yes.
That's just that we have work over the road to continue
Yes,
with.
yes. No, that's
So I would be grateful if we could adjourn at this stage.
Yes. And then tomorrow, have you got a suggestion about starting earlier than 10
Well,
or not?
we are just over halfway through,
Yeah.
but perhaps, and we agree that we should finish this evidence. We do have consultations arranged after hours tomorrow
Yes.
that need to be held, so it would perhaps be safer to start at 9:30 tomorrow.
9:30, yeah. Would that be fine with you, Mr. Grizzly?
Chair, I'm in your hands.
Yes, okay, no, thank you. We'll adjourn now, and then tomorrow we'll start at 9:30.
Thank you, Chair.
We adjourn.
All right.